Big news is coming out of the NFL world, and if you're a Raiders fan, you'll want to hear this. Reports are saying that the Las Vegas Raiders and Matthew Stafford are getting closer to making a deal. The two sides have agreed on the basic trade terms, including Stafford's salary. Now, the only thing left is for the Rams to make their decision. Will they accept the trade or try to keep him? But before we dive into all the details, make sure you subscribe to the channel, like this video, and hit the bell icon so you never miss the latest NFL updates. Let's get into it. Now, according to NFL insider Vincent Bonsignore, the Raiders and Stafford have agreed on what his contract should look like, but the Rams still need to sign off on the trade. If they don't match the Raiders' offer, Stafford could be wearing silver and black very soon. Meanwhile, there's a lot happening at the NFL Combine. The Raiders have been busy meeting with top defensive backs and other key defensive players. We're also getting updates on player measurements, things like height, weight, and arm length for linebackers and defensive linemen. But here's something really interesting. Matthew Stafford was recently spotted hanging out with Tom Brady at a ski resort in Montana. Could Brady have played a role in convincing Stafford to consider the Raiders? Some sources say Brady helped negotiate parts of the contract. If true, that makes things even more exciting. As for the money, the Raiders have around $98 to $99 million in cap space right now. Stafford's rumored contract could be around $50 million per year, which raises the big question. Can the Raiders afford him? Well, they might structure the deal creatively, spreading the money over multiple years. The Las Vegas Raiders are closing in on a game-changing move, and the NFL world is watching closely. Reports suggest the Raiders and Matthew Stafford have already agreed on the terms of a potential contract. Now, it's up to the Rams. Will they match the deal, or will they let Stafford go? But before we break down all the details, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and hit the bell icon so you don't miss any of the latest NFL news. Let's get into it. Now, here's the situation. The Rams are in a tough financial spot. They've spent big on contracts in recent years, and now they don't have enough cap space to keep Stafford comfortably. That's why they've allowed him to explore options with other teams. But trading Stafford means the Rams would officially enter rebuild mode, and that's a major decision. Think about it. They still have head coach Sean McVay, some young defensive stars, and promising offensive players. If they move on from Stafford now, they can start fresh. And guess what? There are already rumors that the Rams might be eyeing Gardner Minshew as a short-term replacement while they develop a new quarterback. If that happens, it could work out perfectly for both teams. But here's the big question. What do the Rams want in return? Even if the Raiders and Stafford agree on a deal worth $40 to $50 million per year, the Rams will demand compensation. That could mean draft picks, cap space adjustments, or even a key player in return. If the Rams ask for this year's 6th overall pick, should the Raiders do it? Honestly, no way. That pick is too valuable in a draft stacked with elite talent at key positions. But if the Rams are willing to take a future first-round pick instead, the deal could make a lot more sense for Las Vegas. So, will the Rams pull the trigger on a trade? Or will they hold on to Stafford and try to make it work? Stay tuned, because this story is only getting started. Things are heating up in the NFL, and the Matthew Stafford situation just got even more interesting. While all signs point to a potential trade, some reports suggest that Stafford might not leave the Rams after all. Could it be that the Rams are just letting him explore the market to see if any team is really willing to pay top dollar? Before we dive into all the latest updates, make sure you subscribe, like this video, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a major NFL story. Now, here's the twist. Stafford might just be testing the waters. He's talking to teams, figuring out his true market value, but what if this is all part of the Rams' plan? Some insiders believe they're letting him do this in hopes that no team offers him a big contract. If Stafford realizes the market isn't as strong as he thought, he might end up staying in LA after all. But let's be real. The Raiders still have a strong chance to land him. And one big advantage? Las Vegas is just an hour from his current home in LA. That means minimal disruption for him and his family, which could make the move even more appealing. Meanwhile, the Raiders are making other moves behind the scenes. At the NFL Combine, they had an official meeting with defensive lineman Shamar Stewart. Now, official meetings aren't just casual chats. Teams specifically request these meetings through agents and organizers. That means the Raiders are seriously considering Stewart as a key piece of their defense. And here's where things get really interesting. Could this mean Malcolm Kuntz won't be re-signed? Kuntz could demand around $16 to $17 million per year, and if the Raiders choose to invest in Stewart instead, that would free up major cap space for a Stafford deal. Imagine this: Stewart lining up alongside Max Crosby, Tyree Wilson, and Christian Wilkins. That's a dominant defensive line, and it could be exactly what the Raiders need to make a playoff run. So, what happens next? Will Stafford officially make the move to Vegas? Will the Raiders pass on Kuntz and build a powerhouse defense instead? The buzz around this guy is insane. After a dominant Senior Bowl performance, scouts are starting to realize he might be the closest thing we've seen to Myles Garrett in years. Now, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Myles Garrett is a generational talent. He's 6 feet 5 inches, 280 pounds of pure muscle, and moves like a wrecking ball with elite speed. That combination is why he's been the best defensive player in the league for years. But here's why Shamar Stewart is drawing those comparisons. Elite first-step explosiveness. He's fast off the snap and can disrupt plays instantly. Incredible agility and bend. Unlike some bigger edge rushers, he changes direction smoothly and doesn't lose speed. Power and technique. He already has a strong rip move and a devastating long-arm technique that makes him a nightmare for offensive tackles. Some analysts made the lazy comparison between Stewart and Tyree Wilson, but let's be clear, they are not the same player. Tyree Wilson is long and strong, but he lacks that explosive first step. That's the one thing you can't teach, and it's exactly what makes Stewart special. Now, here's where things get wild. His athleticism is off the charts. Stewart reportedly has an unofficial relative athletic score, RAS, of 9.99 out of 10, ranking him third out of 1,800 defensive ends since 1987. That's legendary territory. But here's the real question. Would the Raiders take him with the 6th overall pick? Personally, I wouldn't be mad about it. But I'm still a firm believer in proven college production over pure upside. We've seen too many freak athletes bust in the NFL. Give me the guy who dominates on tape over the guy who just looks the part. That being said, if Stewart develops properly, he could be an absolute game changer. And with the Raiders already meeting with him, it's clear they're seriously interested. Oh, and another name to watch? Malachi Starks, a standout defensive back the Raiders also met with. Here's the deal. The Raiders have some big decisions to make. 2 key defensive players are about to hit free agency, and both are looking at contracts worth $17 million or more per year. Can the Raiders afford to bring them both back? Maybe, but do they even want to? That's where Malachi Starks enters the conversation. This guy is a first-round talent, no question. He's fast, instinctive, and battle-tested. Going up against Brock Bowers in practice at Georgia turned him into an absolute beast. But here's the problem. Would the Raiders really take a safety with the 6th overall pick? Positional value matters in the NFL. Even if Starks turns into an All-Pro, would it make sense to take him over a dominant pass rusher or a game-changing wide receiver? Think about it. Teams win championships with elite defensive linemen and game-breaking offensive weapons. That's why a guy like Travis Hunter or Abdul Carter might make more sense. But here's the twist. The Raiders also met with Will Johnson. Now that's a name to watch. A true lockdown corner with size, speed, and elite coverage skills. If the Raiders are serious about fixing their defense, Will Johnson at number 6 might not be a bad idea. That said, let's not forget, offense still needs work. The Raiders can't just load up on defensive talent and hope for the best. They need to score points, move the chains, and dominate in the trenches. The scouting combine has given us some eye-opening numbers, and let's just say, not everyone is thrilled. Some players showed up lighter than expected, some had shorter arms than scouts hoped for, and a few may have just seen their draft stock take a hit. Let's start with Mason Graham. This guy was supposed to be a top-tier defensive tackle, but his measurements raised some eyebrows. 32-inch arms? That's shorter than John Newton's last year, and Newton slipped into the second round because of it. On top of that, his weight came in at 296 pounds, far below the 350 he was listed at in Michigan. That's a huge drop. Now, don't get me wrong, Graham is a strong run defender, but the problem? Pass rushing. If you're taking a defensive tackle at pick number 6, he better be a complete game wrecker, not just a run stopper. I watched his Texas game film again, and I just didn't see it. 2 or 3 good plays here and there won't cut it. Is he really worth a top pick? I'm not convinced. Now let's talk Derek Harmon. This guy came in at 6 feet 4 inches, 313 pounds, with an impressive 34-inch wingspan. That's solid. Harmon is one of the top DT prospects in this class, and honestly, I'd take him over Graham. But here's the thing. There's no true superstar at defensive tackle this year. No Jalen Carter. No Quinnen Williams. Just a bunch of guys in the same tier. So, if you're the Raiders, do you really want to spend pick number 6 on a defensive tackle in a weak DT class? Some of these scouting combine numbers are surprising. Some players are solidifying their stock while others may be slipping. Let's break it down. First, Derek Harmon. This guy ran a 4.95-second 40-yard dash. For a player his size, that's impressive. But then we have Walter Nolan. He measured 6 feet 3 inches and 296 pounds, which is decent. But does he have that elite power to dominate at the next level? Now, let's talk Omar Norman Lott. This Tennessee standout is just under 6 feet 2 inches, and that might hurt his draft ranking. Some scouts believe his height is keeping him from being a top-tier defensive tackle. Same goes for Peebles from Virginia Tech. His tape is fantastic, but his height isn't ideal. In today's NFL, size matters, and unfortunately, it could cost him a higher draft pick. But here's where things get interesting. Deon Walker. He showed up much lighter than expected. We're talking 331 pounds, down from his college-listed 370. That's a big difference. But let me tell you something. Deon Walker is a beast. Kentucky mostly ran a 3-man defensive front, which isn't what you see in the NFL. But whenever they switched to a 4-man front, he dominated. No offensive lineman could handle him one-on-one. And then, at the Senior Bowl, he absolutely wrecked everyone. If he falls to round 2 or 3, that's a steal. And let's not forget about the edge rushers. Tyler Barron came in at 6 feet 4 inches, 258 pounds, which is exactly where he needs to be. But some scouts still have concerns. Let's get into the real story of this draft class, because there are some serious hidden gems that could shake things up. First, let's talk about Mike Green. At 6 feet 3 inches and 250 pounds, he's got the frame, but those 8-inch hands? Some scouts are raising concerns. Does it really matter? For me, not really. His tape speaks for itself. But here's someone you should not sleep on. Landon Jackson from Arkansas. This guy is a monster at 6 feet 6 inches and 264 pounds. High motor, solid pass rush technique, and a relentless drive. Mark my words, he's going to make an impact. Now, here's what makes this draft so unique. It's not top-heavy, but the depth. Unreal. 7 defensive tackles who can be legit starters, 15 edge rushers who will be productive, 15 running backs with real potential, 20 interior offensive linemen who can thrive in the league. And guess what? The Raiders need help at all of these positions. With 4 picks in the top 75, they have a golden opportunity to load up on elite talent. The best part? You don't always need a first-rounder to land a superstar. Take last year, Jackson Powers Johnson wasn't even the first center picked. But now, best center in the draft class. That's how unpredictable the NFL draft can be. This year, the same thing will happen. Some teams will gamble early on a player like Will Campbell, hoping he'll dominate at left guard. But then the Raiders might grab Anthony Belton in the second round, And he could turn out to be an all-pro while Campbell struggles. That's the beauty of this draft. Some elite talents, like Landon Jackson, might slip, and the Raiders could capitalize in a huge way. Now, it all comes down to one thing: Raiders management. They've made some terrible draft decisions in the past. Mike Mayock and John Gruden, disaster. Dave Ziegler, another mess. Tom Telesco did okay. But now, it's on John Spytek. If he plays this right, the Raiders could come out of this draft stacked with talent. If not, well, we've seen how that story ends. Either way, this draft is going to be wild. Stay locked in because some of these names are going to shock you when draft day comes.